Holly, come, you can be in the video. All right, welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're gonna put a couple of things in the landscape here in Raleigh, North Carolina, Zone 7B that we picked up on the road. Steph and I went out, visited Mr. Maple. There are a couple videos from that. There's one more that hasn't been edited yet. We went down to the Cox Arboretum in Canton, Georgia, and Tom was nice enough to send us home with a few things from there. And again, from Mr. Maple, we went to see Ram and Tom's beautiful garden in Athens, Georgia, and then visited several nurseries. And as plant collectors, we're always collecting. Several interesting things. There's a conifer video from that Mr. Maple trip. So there were 10 conifers in that video. 4 of them came home with us. So we'll go over that. I also brought home a couple of Japanese maples. One I've put up a video for since then. This is that Dragon Master that we're going to contort. I have a contorted Tomukiyama Japanese maple in the back garden, and people have asked for years how I went about contorting it or bending the main stem, and so I put up a video a week or so ago if you haven't watched that. We have another dwarf Japanese maple that's going to go in the ground this morning. A couple things that aren't going to go in the ground as part of this today, but soon will. We did bring home a lindera or spice bush from Tom Cox. Well, it was one of the gifts he gave us. And also a pseudo-larix or a golden larch. There's 5 deciduous conifers in the world, and that happens to be one of them. I had a dawn redwood at the old house. Can't remember if I ever did a video on it or not, a metasequoia. But there are taxodium, you guys know bald cypress, that's another one. But there are 5. Pseudo-larix is one of them, and so that's an interesting plant that we'll talk about. It's about this tall right now, so we'll get it in the ground and show it to you next year and talk about it. But deciduous conifers are interesting. You know, most conifers we think of as evergreen plants in the wintertime. And then we also brought this Mahonia gracilis back that Steph really likes. There's an incredible Mahonia collection at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. It was one of the plants that JC really loved, and so there's an incredible collection of them at the Ralston, and they're all in bloom at this time of year. But this Mahonia gracilis is one that Steph's especially drawn to, and someone handed her one without knowing that, and so she's pretty excited about that. But we'll get those in the ground soon. So let's jump to another spot and talk about something that's going in the ground this morning. We have this African basil, which we've got enough freeze on now to kill it back. These are annuals for us here. It's actually a perennial, and you can take cuttings on these and keep them year to year. Pollinators really love this plant. For us, we just let it die. We've got a place where we can normally get one for a couple dollars in the spring, and you put it in this big, and it gets this big in a single season. We don't cut back our native perennials because we let a lot of things overwinter on them, and grasses, things like that. So we like to leave that stuff up. But some of these annuals that die to the ground like this, we'll go ahead and pull them out, get them on the compost pile, or run them through a chipper or something like that, whatever's needed. And man, this thing can really take up some space in a single season. And this is after dying back to the ground. It's kind of amazing. There's some other perennial things planted in here that will like to have this space. I think we'll have to plant this African basil somewhere else if we're going to use it at all next year. This is a pink filigree Japanese maple that we got from Mr. Maple. This is a weeping variety that'll reach maybe 5 feet in height and 6 feet in width in about 10 years. And so this is kind of the perfect space for it. We don't have a lot of these spaces left. This had been reserved for this basil for the last 2 years. Well, again, a lot of the annuals that we have in this landscape are just kind of holding spaces for us, and they're colorful in the meantime while we find something that we're interested in having permanently to place there. This one leafs out pink, a pinkish orangey in the spring, and then has red and green tones throughout the summer, and then an orangey red fall color. Really, really beautiful weeping Japanese maple. And our soil now, especially up here, look at this. I mean, it's just amazing how quick this changed. Now I can get down, I'll show you something real quick. If I go down here deep enough, you can really see how much the soil has changed. This was all clay-based soil. I'm not gonna be able to There's a couple roots from this maple tree that used to be over there that are here, but you know, I'm now down 6, 7, 8 inches down in the ground. You can see how this soil looks now. This is from keeping it covered in compost and wood chips, and just really amazing change. This is a good looking tree, good root system. We're planting near the end of November, and making sure the graft on this Japanese maple doesn't get covered up ever. That's where the top of this tree is attached to a different rootstock down here below. You see where that tag is, where the graft is on it. And so we'll make sure that never drops below, or mulch or anything. I'll tamp him in. I probably should say that, you know, I'm looking at this tree and I am thinking somewhat about the angle someone's going to view it. So, you know, you might want to stand back and look. The two main branches I have on this thing are, you know, heading left and right of where people will be looking at it from. We'll do some pruning on it in the future, we'll show you, but we won't need to do that for a couple of years. We're not that far from mulching this space, so I'm leaving this thing up an inch or two. But there you go, just like that. I'll leave that tag on for now. We mark everything write everything down on a plan so that we know what they are in the future. And we'll have tags in the ground too sometimes, but most of the time our main backup plan is to have it on a plan, on a piece of graph paper, so we can remember all these interesting plants. Next up is this Thuja occidentalis. This one, the name for it is a neek, but it's sold as Sienna Sunset. Look how compact this little Thuja is. This one, the native range for Thuja occidentalis is way north of where we are here in Raleigh, North Carolina, meaning it's a little hot here. I think Mr. Maple has on their site zones 3 to 7, or maybe even 2 to 7, or something like that. I have seen this one for, you know, zone 8, zone 9. I think that's probably a little hot for it. You know, if you're putting this one in the ground, it's a neat plant. It only grows about an inch a year. It'll reach maybe be a 2-foot round, super compact ball in like 10 years probably. So really slow growing. We're actually going to put this one in a container and put it up here on the porch for now. We'll eventually put it in the ground at some point, but I just find it super interesting as a container plant, and literally found a container on the side of the road, probably a very expensive container. It's a very heavy one. So we're always on the lookout for that, by the way. Somebody puts a container out by the road, it's coming home with us probably. This one has a kind of a yellowish green new growth in the spring, and then in the winter time it'll turn pretty bronze. Probably less so for us down here in zone 7B. It'll probably stay on the greener side. It's got a little bit of that bronzing in it now, but we just brought it back from the North Carolina mountains. We've had a little cold on it right now, but I don't think it'll get all that bronze for us, but definitely will in colder areas. Good choice for a container plant for us because it's so cold hardy. I don't have to worry about this one at all. I've got a combo of some pine bark and compost that I use for my shrub container plantings. I think that's probably about enough on the bottom of it. I could put a couple pansies around this as well if we wanted to. Yeah, setting in there perfect where it's about an inch below the lip. Give a little reservoir for the water when we water it. Won't have to do a lot of watering on this winter, but will at some point. And again, we could I got some pansies in the back garden that we haven't planted yet. I might put add a couple of those to it. There you go. This thing can stay in this container probably for a couple years, but this is, what a cool little plant, huh? Next up is this Austrian pine called Oregon Green, Pinus nigra. This is going to ultimately get bigger than this spot will take, okay? We have a small lot here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and keep in mind the way we're planting and the way we're collecting plants, we plan on flipping things out at some point, you know, over the years. We'll find something we're more interested in. This isn't for most people. So, you know, I'm telling you how big it'll actually get. You know, over about 10 years, it'll get about 10 feet tall and maybe 6 feet wide if you just leave it alone. Very asymmetrical growth habit. So, you know, limb over here and a branch over there, really, really interesting, especially for something like a Japanese garden. Any place you want some, you know, some non-formal looking pine. Great plant for that. Again, so you would give it a little more space, obviously, than we're going to give it here in our Raleigh garden. But we're interested in collecting plants, interested in showing off plants, interested in showing you how this will grow over the next 2, 3, 4 years. And then we'll find something else. We have a lantana here that's in the way of this planting. Got quite large this year and was actually blooming up until a week or two ago. It was really pretty late for the lantana here in Raleigh to have been blooming, but I'm gonna do that haircut there, and that's the spot where this will go. Next year I can't let this get this big. This is a perennial lantana. Okay, now I got plenty of room. This will be easy digging. Again, there was a maple tree here, and we left the wood chips. You know, if somebody's taking trees down in your yard, have them leave the wood chips. The wood chips and the ground up stump became this incredible soil over the last 30 months or so. That and a little bit of compost added, and we've mulched it a few times. But good looking, another good looking plant. Nice root system. Root system's big enough to hold the soil together here, but not so much that I would consider it root bound. These are grafted, so this is a lot of these specialty plants you buy, you know, Japanese maples, a lot of the conifers, interesting conifers you buy will be grafted like this. A lot of fruit trees, a lot of grapes, a lot of fruiting plants will be grafted. So keep in mind, if you're, you know, wherever that graft is, you want to make sure that never gets buried. I've dug this hole way too deep, so I'll come back in here and just fill that back in just a hair. Make sure that graft is never going to go below the soil level. Some people will bury grafts on some things, but I keep them high and dry. And tuck that soil around gently, get some of the air out of it. We'll water them in once. And planting here something that's super, super cold hardy. This time of year, I won't have to do any watering on this through the winter here in Raleigh. Unlikely I would have to water it, but that doesn't mean I'll completely ignore it. We'll fertilize these things in probably late February, early March, and that's it. Really super drought tolerant, road salt tolerant, urine tolerant, like a lot of interesting things for this plant that make it a really tough ornamental plant that will give you something super interesting in the garden. One that we haven't figured out where we're going to put is this little Cypress. This is a golden dwarf Cypress. This is our golden Dwarfinoki Cypress. This one only get about 2 to 3 feet. Perfect little round habit. More sun, the more color on these, which can be kind of problematic here. The further south you go with these, because at some point you can get a little bleaching on the gold ones. I've got this nightlight Cypress right here that holds up great in the full sun out here. And you can see how gold it is right in late November, and it's looked like that all year. I put this photo on Instagram probably too much because this thing is always just looking so great. It looks great with this purple mustard for the winter. We have a Dwarfinoki Cypress back here behind us, and this is a gold Dwarfinoki Cypress. So I haven't found the spot where we're going to put this one, but this one's a perfect little 2 to 3 foot mound. I think this one really fits most ornamental landscapes. Those of you who want something that's kind of neat and orderly, this is a perfect conifer for that. Give you great winter color, like, you know, just like this, like the nightlight is here, but in a really compact package. The last one going in the ground today, some of the other things that we brought back will go into other projects that you guys will see upcoming. But the last one going in the ground today is a little bit of an experiment for us. We do have a blue spruce, a dwarf blue spruce in the back garden, and it's done fine. This one is Nigra compacta. This is Pisia Orientalis, or Oriental spruce. Okay, these are really best in like zones 3. We're in zone 7B, 8A here in the southeast, and some of these Spruces are definitely not happy with heat and humidity. Out on the west coast in the Pacific Northwest in zone 7 and zone 8, they do fine. But here, and again in the southeast, we can have a problem. So what we do with ours, they need sun. And so the one in the back garden is getting about 3 hours of direct sun later, mid to late day. And then it's back in the shade. This one will get morning sun. The sun's hitting me now. It'll get morning sun for maybe 3 or 4 hours, and then it will not be in the worst of the heat of the day. Slow growing. This one will get about 6 feet in height. And again, we hope that it will tolerate our heat and humidity here in Raleigh, North Carolina. But it's really, really a beautiful little spruce. And so again, this little corner spot behind this rock is going to be a great place for it. It would, if it was happy, you know, in 15 or 20 years, it would outgrow this space. But I have a feeling that all conditions are going to stun it somewhat. And it'll be a nice, interesting piece here on the corner. Again, behind this container. I'm amazed I can dig like this out here now. I mean, just, you know, don't even have to stand up to dig this hole. I'm gonna break this root ball up a bit. This one is a little more, it's not root bound really badly, but it is a little more so than the other things that I've pulled out of the container in this video. So breaking this one up a little bit, getting these roots headed outward. Gonna give this thing the best chance that I can. Another thing that we do here that helps these conifers that don't like the heat is we will have annuals planted around it in the spring. There's bulbs that'll be coming up. It'll always be mulched. There's a sedum here that'll eventually fill in under where it can. So we're not letting the sun just hammer the roots on this thing. It's one of the ways that we've been able to keep some things happy that don't necessarily like the heat here in the south, is having other things help shade them. So there you go. Beautiful. All right. I really love these. It's so funny in gardening. We all want the things we can't have, right? If you're in New York, you want tropicals. If you're in Florida, you want lilacs. And if you're in the southeast, we want conifers that they can grow in the Pacific Northwest. That's the way it is, right? You want the things that are the hardest, you know, and the you know, that seem out of place in your garden, you know, where you want bananas in the north. So thank you guys for following along with the channel, and we hope to hit the road and do some more traveling this next year and find some interesting things and some interesting people along the way. And thanks to everybody who invites us into their spaces and shares these wonderful things with us. Thanks for watching.